Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And that's right. You are the inspired and the inspiration. So let's be inspired, let's inspire others, and let's inspire before we expire. Welcome to Inspired Living, where every moment is an opportunity to ignite your passion and your curiosities and embrace the many mysteries, phenomenons, the unknown, the ordinary, and yes, the extraordinary. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, here with you yet again for another soul adventure, an inspiring episode to explore, discuss, and discover the many diamonds within each and every one of us and the many hidden gems that have yet to be revealed to us and the world. I'm thrilled to have you join us today as we embark on a journey of inspiration, motivation, and transformation. Whether you're tuning in from the comfort of your home, on the road, or wherever life takes you, this show is designed to uplift your spirit and empower your dreams. Inspired Living is all about fostering a supportive and empowering community. Each episode will highlight incredible guests like we have today, who have overcome challenges, pursued their passions, and make a positive impact in their respective fields and our amazing and beautiful world. The journey matters, and we want to celebrate your victories no matter how big or small. And together, we can cultivate a mindset of possibility and unlock the doors to our dreams. Inspired listeners can expect engaging discussions, thought-provoking questions, and actionable steps to manifest inspiration into your reality. Of course, we always give a big shout out and say thank you to all of our inspired listeners from around the globe, the universe, and beyond. The team and I are always so very humbled and grateful for you listening, downloading, subscribing, leaving reviews, and voting to make Inspired Living not only a best inspirational show, but now also a best spiritual show to follow and listen to as referenced by FeedSpot. So we really appreciate that. And of course, we really appreciate you. If you've not yet subscribed, liked, or followed the show, there's always time to do so over on our main social media platforms. At Facebook, just look for the Community Inspired Living Radio and Podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and X, formerly known as Twitter, under the handle Inspired For Us. That is the number 4, Inspired For Us. Or always over on our YouTube channel, Inspired Living Radio. And of course, we're also streaming through Audible, or you can listen to the show wherever you get your favorite podcast. So let's get ready to be inspired, uplifting, encouraged, and motivated, because the best is always yet to come. So let's go prospecting together, shall we? So today we're welcoming to the show for the first time Miss Joan Perry. We're going to talk about her new book, but I wanted to open up the show because it's going to be about heroism and heroes. And I was recently watching a Joseph Campbell series called The Hero's Journey on NPR a week ago. And there was a quote that stuck with me, and I think it's going to be relevant to today's show. And it says this: "We must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us." And that's from Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey. And so I thought that was fitting for today's show. So we're going to talk a little bit about Joan's book. She is a trailblazing leader, internationally best-selling author, and inspiring speaker devoted to helping women transform their toughest moments into triumph breakthroughs. And a little bit just about her journey, and I think she's a perfect guest for today's show on Inspired Living, is because she's helping and devoted to help women with their toughest moments and help them turn those breakdowns into breakthroughs. Her own journey is a powerful testament to the strength every woman holds, the strength to rise, to redefine success, and to step fully into your purpose. Her acclaimed book, The Heroine's Journey, The Art of Becoming the Heroine of Your Own Life, is more than just a guide. It's a heartfelt roadmap to self-discovery, courage, and empowerment. Described as a, quote, love letter to the feminine spirit, end quote, the book calls women to reclaim their inner power and write their own success stories. Joan has shared the stage with icons like Tony Robbins, T. Harv Eker, and her transformative insights have been featured not only on NPR, which I was just watching, CNN, and in Glamour magazine. Through her speaking and writing, she continues to spark powerful conversations about resilience, about leadership, and women's empowerment on a global scale. If you want to visit our social media pages, we have all of the links, including the free book that she's offering, a little bit of insight to that. But you can visit her website at walkthejourney.com, or you can get the book at heroinesbook.com. And again, you can get all these links on any of our social media pages. And without further ado, Miss Joan Perry, welcome to Inspired Living. How are you, my friend?
Mark, thank you so much. And thank you for just welcoming me to your audience. I really appreciate it. You know, I have to start here and tell you this is really fun because I'm always interviewed by women. And now we're going to have a guy's point of view on this. You started it perfectly. We're going to launch right off where you started. And this should be a very interesting conversation.
Yes, and I love the message. Like I was telling you before the show, my wife really resonated with the message in the book, and we had some conversations on it. But I think it's important to have in our journey of life to have multiple perspectives, to know, just not from a woman's point of view, but from a man's point of view, and have conversations that talk about that journey of resilience and empowerment and transformation. And I know. When I was researching for today's show, you talk about sometimes you must go through the difficulties, get baffled, unnerved, roughed up, undone, then older and wiser to start the journey of you where you become the heroine of your own life. And I think that's very true because we've all gone through whatever life throws at us, and we all have our experiences because we are the sum of our experiences. But tell the listening audience and my inspired listeners out there all around the globe about how this book, because you've written several books. This isn't your first book. You've got a few other books out there as well that we'll get into a little bit later. But for this show, give us some insight in that diamond, the diamond that you revealed to share with the world on the heroine's journey and the art of becoming the heroine of your own life.
Actually, Mark, let's start right here because noting Joseph Campbell was a great place to start. My big message to women is that we don't have a hero's journey, which is, of course, the journey that you take to maturity. As women, we have a heroine's journey, and ours is a decidedly different journey that leads to a woman's joy, prosperity, and freedom. I'm going to start with a quick story just so we can tie it right into what you were saying, and that's that Liz Gilbert, of course, the famous author, women's author of Eat, Pray, Love, big writer for women and our thinking. She stood on Oprah's stage, and I was in the audience, and I thought what she said was going to just blow me to the moon. I was so shocked by what she said, and what she said was that she asked Joseph Campbell, who you just referred to, if women have a similar journey to a man, a path to maturity. And Joseph Campbell is reported to have said to her, no, they don't. They stay home and cry.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yeah. So I'm making a big distinction here. First of all, I want to note that I think, and after 10 years of study on this, that Joseph Campbell was right in one way and wrong in another. Thank you, Joseph. What he said is women don't have a hero's journey, and that's true. What he didn't say, where he was wrong, is women do have their own journey. Now, right before my book was set to be published, I came across a quote and snuck it into the last page of the book right before it went off to be printed. And Joseph Campbell had apparently matured by that point, because the quote, which is a beautiful one, he was down in Ethelon in California speaking about his subject. And he said, truth is, I don't know if women have a journey. I don't know what the journey would be. It would take a woman to tell us what that journey is. So here I am. I have, been thinking about this ever since that catapulted me off the stadium seat I wondered if I was the only person in the whole stadium that heard that statement. And what I discovered from my own life was that he helped me reorient my own life to a heroine's journey that led me to the prosperity and freedom and joys that I was looking for. And just as one more comment here, the difference is the hero's journey, which of course, Mark, you know so well. You were taught to go out, fight the lions, tigers, and bears, and bring back the bacon. That would look like you graduated from college, you went off into the workforce, you made some money, and maybe you brought it back to the college that you went to, and they were very happy. When I got out of business school, I looked around and I said, what is the success path for a woman? And, the only real answer I could come up with is, oh, look at that guy. He's making money. That must be my path. And so what did I do? I set off on a hero's journey, went to work on Wall Street, traded very large blocks of bonds, started my own female brokerage firm. But about midlife, I realized that I had climbed to the top of the ladder, but the ladder was in the wrong building. And why do I say that so? Thank you. Why do I say that so firmly? Because the heroine's journey, by contrast, is an internal journey. It's an internal journey where we claim our self-worth as women and our voice. A man's journey is an external journey where it's the outside world that he's about, living within and negotiating. For a woman, it's an internal journey. It's her self-worth and her voice that is her path forward.
Oh, I love that. And, what's interesting about this conversation, this is why I wanted to have you on the show, Joan, is to offer this perspective. Because to be fair, the series that I was watching with Joseph Campbell was from like the 1970s. You could tell by the grainy footage of the video. You could tell by the clothes that they're wearing. And so, I found it interesting. And I'm glad that he said that later in life, because I think it was also, we tend to be a product of our times, including groupthink. And I think in the 70s, the thought process would have been a little bit different than it is today. That's what we call progress. That's what we call, evolution for our consciousness. And I was thinking of something that Kate, the famous actress Kate Blanchett had said. She says, I don't see myself as the heroine in my own narrative. And what you're saying is, it makes a lot of sense to me, because we do go out, men, externally to find that, that concept of what you're talking about, where women tend to go more internal. And I just find that to be very interesting. And the synchronicity. So I would have referenced Joseph Campbell. And, I always talk about coincidences and synchronicities, and Einstein always referred to this. He always said that coincidences and synchronicities, paraphrasing here, are God's remain in a I start off show with this perspective and this synchronicity, talking about how the times have changed, and women are stepping at a global scale into their power and who they are, but just more of the internal process. I think men can probably learn a little bit more about that process. Tell us about the day from around the world to get the book. Is that correct? Like, you can actually get this book for free? You just pay for the shipping?
Yes, you can go to heroinesbook.com, and we have a free plus shipping offer. I'm just asking you to help me get it into your hands. This is a message that I want to just go far and wide for women, because, as we were just talking about, the man, he deals with the lions, tigers, and bears of the world that he goes into. But for us as women, and you can relate to this, we're debating all the time the messages that culture gives us, be skinny, don't talk too much, and the messages that we give ourselves, that we tell ourselves. So the very first job for a woman on the heroine's journey is to claim her self-worth. And that really takes into consideration sort of managing between all these voices that are coming to us about who we should be, what we should look like, even the silly ones, like you should have a credit card because a woman is, cooler with a credit card. Whereas we actually get victimized in the process of many of those messages that come to us both internally and externally. So, I hope you will get the book. I'm speaking to your listeners. I hope you will read it because it really helped me. This is the journey I took. When I looked back and I said, how the heck did I get myself out of, you referred to it, Mark. I mean, my whole life blew up like, a, a, a yard sale and scattered all over. It started with a divorce. It went on to a family estate issue. I just didn't think I could get myself. My therapist said, there's so many fires burning around you. Like, which one do we deal with first? And as I looked back on it, and two things I would say about it. One is, because of that first story I told you about Joseph Campbell, I was very curious. And the second one is that I really noted what it was that helped me to move forward. Is it okay if I tell you another story?
Yes, please.
So the second story that really inspired me to write this book is I was with a group of friends down in Mexico. It was a women's retreat, and we were sitting around a lovely bonfire on the beach when all of a sudden a woman that I knew pretty well came and kind of snuggled next to me around the bonfire, and I didn't expect to see her there. But I could tell immediately when she sat down that her heart was heavy. So I had a chance to ask her, and what I learned is that she and her husband had gotten on a plane in Canada, flown down to Mexico. It was, I think, their 24th, 25th something anniversary. She was just thinking of this great trip they were having to Mexico with all, the celebration. They walked into the hotel. There were rose petals everywhere in their room, champagne glasses. It was a big celebration. They walked down the hill and got in a canoe, and the canoe was going to take them around the cove because they were going to go to a restaurant high on the cove. So they got out of the canoe. They walked up the long hill. When they got to the top, there was a fence, and looking over, they could see magnificent blue sky above them and crashing sea on the rocks below them. And it was just such an awe-inspiring, magical sight. And he turned to her in that moment and said, I want a divorce. Hello?
Oh, there we go. Nope, I couldn't get the button to unmute. Sorry about that. Lucy was being a little stuck here. Say that last part, Joan. There was a little bit of a cutout.
So they got to the top of the hill, standing in front of this fence, looked over, beautiful blue sky above them, sea crashing on the rocks below them. And he turned to her and said, I want a divorce. Are you there?
Technical did my end, Joan.
Did you hear me say that? He said to her he wanted a divorce. Okay. So she looked at him just shocked. I mean, this was supposed to have been such a beautiful moment of her life. And all of a sudden now she was confronted with what looked like a near-death situation. And what I got out of that story immediately, which combined with the first story I told you, is that I believe as women that we reach this point in our lives where we have to decide in the moment, do I put my wings on to fly or do I fall nose forward and crash on the rocks below? When you're standing on that cliff and you have to put your wings on to fly in the moment, you doubt yourself and you suddenly say to yourself, maybe I need more resources, skills, maybe I don't have it in me. But what you learn is your courage and strength is called out in that moment. And the heroine, she does put her wings on and fly. Now, that doesn't mean that she doesn't need some support and some help. But part of the heroine's journey is something that upsets your apple cart, something that comes along and just, makes you think, oh my God, where did that come from? Why did that happen to me? And you can decide to stand on that cliff for a long period of time. In fact, I'll tell you, in my own life, I stayed there for too long. I, cried a lot, sucked my thumb, was unhappy with what was happening. But the truth is, and I know you're going to not want to believe me when I say this, the truth is that as I look back on all that now, and I'm talking, a couple of years, 5 years out, I look back on it now and I think, what a gift. What a gift that was. Now, if you're in the throes of it, that may seem hard to believe at this point. But you know what? What the heroine's journey does, and the blessing of the upset, is that it peels you back like an onion. I mean, first off, your vision of what life is and what it's supposed to be is dashed in the moment. And, you can say that that's terrible. However, it opens you to new possibilities, new beliefs, new ways of doing things, new resources. What worked in the past doesn't work now. And so you have to, really become a creative being that starts to ask yourself all kinds of questions. And that's what the heroine's journey does. The heroine's journey invites you to ask the big questions. Probably in the first part of your life, which is typical, we construct our lives for security and safety. We have this illusion that we can just control our lives, we can make them go along smoothly. I always laugh because my father used to say, save for a rainy day. And I would say to my father, I am not having any rainy days. And that was pretty much as far as I took the conversation, wanted to think about it, or, was creative about any possibilities of something other than sunny, shiny days. So when it came along in my life that I hit this major, major upset, it had to do with, a divorce that I didn't expect with, it was a horrible divorce. It was a mean divorce. It was, I had lawyers who made my life difficult. I had just about crawled out of that when a big, big family estate problem hit. But what it did do is that it stripped me of a life that I thought was everything in life. And you know what? Once I could go with it, realize the heroine's journey, see what my next steps were, it looked to me like maybe there was something better still to come. And that's the message I want to send to Marc's listeners too. There is something better to come. God doesn't make mistakes. There is a plan for your life. There is more life for you, even though you find yourself in really difficult times. Now, what's beautiful, okay.
The future of Internet radio is here. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for
summer break because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Inspired Living. Our special guest today, Joan Perry, talking about her new book, The Heroine's Journey, The Art of Becoming the Heroine of Your Own Life. So, Joan, my apologies. We had some technical difficulties, but I think I'm back. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Are you good?
Okay. Yeah, a little bit of sometimes when you work with technology, you get those, those gremlins in the matrix, if you will. But you were talking about right before the break there of your second story, and you had mentioned getting a credit card at one point, and we were talking about keeping up with the times, and if you even just go back to the 1970s, women couldn't have a bank account, couldn't have a home mortgage, couldn't have a credit card. So sometimes that progression takes time. I mean, just over 100 years ago, women couldn't vote. So we're now into that, that society where consciousness, I think, has evolved, and women, I think, I know are seen differently versus just staying at home and crying, as Joseph Campbell, as you had alluded to, not having that journey. And I think it's just a very interesting perspective for this book. So for the listeners out there, because you also talked about listening to the voice within, right? Some of the worst self-sabotaging comes from ourselves and the voices that we listen to, about, like you said, look in a certain way, image, what, people think women should be doing or not doing. So how do you get out of that self-sabotage inner voice, and how do you embrace that inner heroine to lead with the confidence that your book talks about? How do you embrace that? How do you get out of that spiral, that mindset, if you will?
Yeah, really good question, and a big part of why I wrote the book. Because as I said, I was in a spiral that I didn't think I'd ever come back out of. It's funny because, I owned I started the first female investment banking firm in the country. Like, I was a woman who had, balls, so to speak, because I was on the hero's journey. But then what I realized is that balls were not going to get me out of the difficulty I was in. I needed to cultivate inner strength, and that inner strength, because there's nothing stronger than a woman who has inner strength. It's not, our strength does not come from, fighting. And if you see statues of men, they all carry a weapon. But women, when you see statues, they don't carry a weapon. The strength of a woman comes from within. So if I can
Mhm.
give you another visual to help, I like visuals because then I think we remember. So
Yeah,
I tell
me too.
women to think of your life like a flower cart. You know those kind of old, the cool ones that were like wood and patinaed, and
Yeah.
they had the wood slats on the side, and loaded inside of that flower cart are beautiful flowers. And these are your skills, your tools, your talents, whatever. And your intention is to pull that cart to market where you're going to monetize your skills, your tools, and your talents. But you're driving down the road and you look over your back shoulder and you say, oh my gosh, there's a wheel back there that's loose. What's up with that? And then you think, oh, wow. You look over your other shoulder and you're like, that wheel just fell off and my butt is dragging on the ground, you know? And you're trying to get your skills, tools, and talents, those beautiful flowers, to market. So you get out of the cart, you go to the front of it, you try to pull it, you can't pull it, you try to push it, you can't push it because your wheels have become loose. Okay, so what are the wheels? The wheels are your financial life, your sourcing your life force physical energy, your self worth, and people in your life. So, having your wheels off the car look like you don't live within your means. You've got people around you who are trying to push you down. They don't lift you up. They're saying things to you that resonate in your brain that cause your self worth to be depleted. You
Mhm.
have you have a lack of physical energy because you're not doing the things that support you. So these are the ways your wheels fall off. To do what you're talking about, which is to go forward with courage and strength and heroine up and be the person that a woman wants to be in her life, all four of those wheels have to get back on the cart. That's why I always get upset when I hear people say to women, get empowered. That is a message of go fight the hero's fight. No.
Mhm.
First, a woman has to get the wheels on her car. What does that look like? Okay. Financially, that looks like cut up your credit cards, live within your means, and create stability. Because the first steps on the heroine's journey are to create your stability. The
Mhm.
second wheel looks like, you know, manage the people in your life so that the people around you are loving and kind and generous. When I get up every day, I love to be with the people I'm with. That other wheel is your self worth, where you learn the tools and skills in the book that teach you to edit what's going on in your brain, to have a delete key when you hear yourself saying something. Your self worth is your biggest treasure. And if you don't hold on to that treasure firmly, the rest of it's not going to work well. So,
I love that.
the yeah, that's a really big one. And that's where the journey starts. It starts with claiming your self worth and learning the tools that can allow a woman to be strong and capable inside. So far, we've got financial, we've got people, we've got beliefs, which is your self worth, and the fourth wheel is physical, and that is sourcing your life force energy. You know some of this, but we don't really think of it as putting it all together in life force energy. It includes getting
Right.
enough sleep, eating the right foods, you know, so that particularly if you're in the crisis or the challenge stages of the heroine's journey, when you're trying to get yourself going, you need that. We call it oomph. You need that oomph
Yeah.
to
Oh.
get on and get up, because your objective is to put the wheels back on your cart and get yourself moving so that you get to market. And market for a woman looks like living in your joy, your prosperity, and your freedom.
Mm. Mm. I love all that. I love that. Great message. Stability, foundation, self worth, biggest treasure, physical. It really, if we apply the spiritual aspect to this conversation, it really is about knowing yourself, right? For,
Yeah.
men, it's a little bit different, and for women, it's a little bit different,
Uh-huh.
but it really comes back to the same narrative of to truly know thyself
is to explore the inner world of who we are, but also that external world. And, as you were saying that, Joan, one of the women that came to mind when I started, my spiritual path, over 2 decades ago, and that curiosity that we talked about the many curiosities that are out in this world and who we are. I think of Louise Hay, who wrote her
definitely.
first book back in 1984, and I believe she was around the age of 60. And they always said that, at the time, if we go back to the time frame of 1984, and you have a lady that's in her 60s, she took a lot of ageism, a lot of like, oh, you're too old to start a marketing company, you're too old to write a book. And when I came into the spiritual arena, if you will, I actually started listening to Hay House Radio, and that was something that she had founded. And then her book, of course, her self-help books along the way, really made her, who she was, even years after turning 60. But for me, that was a great example of like, age is a number, and we're the only species that measures our life by a number and how many times we've gone around the sun. But I've always found Louise Hay's story, as well as your story, to step out, because that takes courage, right? Especially given the times, whether it's 1984 or 2025, that takes courage and I think dedication, and again, building on those foundations that you talked about. Edit your, you don't have to believe everything in your mind. Edit your thoughts. Move into that stability, those foundations, that self-worth, and then of course you bring forth a book that women can, and men. I think men, if I can read it, men, then you can also read it, because I think it gives a perspective, and I think that's important to our journey to know thyself, is have multiple perspectives.
And the thing is, let's take that apart a little bit with Louise Hay.
Sure.
If she had believed that, she would have never done all those things. I had a professor in college who said to me, "You're a writer." I said, No, I'm not a writer. I'm a biology student. And it took me years to realize that I should have zipped my mouth and listened, because he was telling me about my gift. And later, when I wrote A Girl Needs Cash, which was my first book, I took him a signed copy and said, "You were so right. It just took me a long time to figure that out." So the trick, like you're talking about with Louise Hay, is that she got it quickly. She edited that quickly. She lived in her gifts. She took on her talents, because the arc of the heroine's journey is first to create your stability. That's why I gave you the example of the cart. The second is to awaken your authenticity. And from a spiritual point of view, Marc, you'll love that, because that we are not ourselves unless we awaken what's real and true about us. And, and I always say, until you get stable, you can't awaken your authenticity. You are living in prostitution, because you're going to have to take a job you don't want to take to, buy what you need to buy in order, whatever. So first you have to get stable. You awaken your authenticity. Once you awaken your authenticity, you can light up your gifts. And that's where the magic starts to happen, because then you bring to the world what is true, authentic, and, and what you're here to do, your mission, your purpose. And that the fourth step, or the fourth arc in the heroine's journey, is to make your contribution. And that is where life is just luscious, because, you are living your true nature.
Yes. And again, I love that point, Joan, because if she would have listened to the pundits or the critics or the experts of their time in 1984, I would have no knowledge, and we would not be talking about her years later, like we're talking about Louise Hay today. So, for you inspired listeners out there, there's always going to be opinions, but to really know thyself and step into what Joan is talking about today is knowing thyself, but moving with courage and moving with dedication and bravery to move past those opinions, because opinions are like elbows and eyebrows, and almost everybody on the planet has those. So move past into that intuition and that know thyself, and go after what you want to go after.
And Louise Hay did not use force or might. She didn't go out with a weapon. She didn't go out to destroy and destruct, which there's a place for men, and go fight the lions, tigers, and bears. But the point is, by contrast, she was a heroine. She came from her own strength, her own self-knowing, her own self-worth. She lived into her gifts because she edited her brain, and she didn't let culture or family or the world interfere with that, or herself. And as a result, we see her today as a true heroine. And that was my first reaction when Joseph Campbell said that we'd stay home and cry. I was like, would that mean we wouldn't have any, Louise Hayes? We wouldn't have any Eleanor Roosevelts? We wouldn't have any Amelia Earharts? But
any
unfortunately,
Oprahs?
and the Oprahs, absolutely. Unfortunately, and part of my mission is I want to awaken women. Please, Mark's listeners, look around you and see who are the heroines in your own life. Because we don't pay enough attention to that as women. And there are wise women who've come before us who have a lot to teach us. And those heroines, history doesn't write about them generally. But we need to acknowledge them and understand their path in order to blossom fully into our best selves as women.
Yeah, exactly. From Joseph Campbell to Louise Hay. While you were saying that, I was thinking, because you talked about earlier how most men's statues have weapons in their hands. I wonder if maybe there is a Louise Hay statue out there. I don't know that. But if there is, I'm trying to visualize what her statue would look like. It would definitely not have a weapon. But would it have, would it be a book? Would it be like a headset for, radio? I'm just curious, like, what would that look like for her statue? Because you're right, she didn't come with the aggressive, approach to what she was trying to do. She just believed in herself, and people accepted that. And I think that's very, very important.
Nor would Oprah, nor would Eleanor Roosevelt. Think about Eleanor Roosevelt's internal strength. That isn't, we don't emulate that as women, but when we start to watch out, because we will have equal footing, and I so believe in the yin and the yang. We need men to be strong, and we need women to be strong.
I agree with you 100%. Yep.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, how can, for our listeners out there, especially the women of Inspired Living that are listening, how can women build that unshakable self-worth that you talk about? You talked about self-worth being the biggest treasure. How can you build that foundation? I mean, somebody might be listening and say, oh yeah, easier said than done. I've been working at this for a long time and nothing's happening. But how can women build that unshakable self-worth to create that lasting impact that we're talking about today?
Well, first of all, you know what I'd say? I'd say go get the Heroine's Journey book at heroinesbook.com.
Great plug. I love it.
It's what I coach on. It's what I speak on. It is entirely, I start with telling women you have more courage and more strength than you know. Because the culture has dumbed it down for us. So internally, you have talents and resources and capabilities that are just dying to blossom. And our growth, the great thing about the Heroine's Journey is it includes a roadmap and tells you step by step what steps you have to take going forward. In the early part of it, it teaches you to put your past in perspective. Because if you're still feeling victimized or like, the world or people or other people have taken you, it's pretty hard to stand up like a heroine. So you have to put your past in perspective, sort of see it like it's on celluloid, like, it's a movie. They always say, don't talk about your story until you're no longer bleeding from it. And then the next step is to look at the journey and say, okay, what are my next steps? And the next steps are going to include what I talked to you about the flower cart. How's your financial life going? How are the people in your life affecting you? How's your oomph? You have to, when I have a day that's rocky or I'm not being my best, I stop and I think, which wheel is not working so well today? Because that middle part is where you need to take action. And then the next part of the Heroine's Journey is to inspire hope for your future. And when you turn from victimhood to heroine upping, your future lights up with hope. Because the truth is, women are meant to blossom as naturally as a rose. There is an energy that inspires a rose to open to its full beauty. The rose can't stop it, The rose can't say to a rose, stop that. And the same is true for a woman, We are meant to live into our full beauty. There is a natural, you know, I would say God-given energy that wants you to grow. And the heroine's journey, including the crisis and the challenge stages of the journey, are all perfectly designed to have a woman grow to her best self.
Powerful. Many diamonds today on today's show. And again, I know there's a lot going on in our world, but I think it, given the time too, especially for the women listeners out there, what a time to step in and be supported too. Because at some points that we've been talking through this last hour, there are certain points in history and times that women were not supported. Women were viewed differently based on society and groupthink and being empowered. What for you, Joan? What does looking ahead, I guess, to the next generation, the younger generations that are listening to maybe this show or getting your book, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave for this next generation of heroines?
I hope to create many, 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 many around the world heroines. Because a heroine is not about, competing with a man or
Right.
taking on a battle. A heroine is about her own strength. And I think
hmm
it's so important that women, the heroine's journey is to claim your self-worth and your voice. And I think it's so important for women to speak into what's going on in our world now. We are just a different point of view and a valid point of view. But you can't have voice if you don't have self-worth. That's why, to me, it starts with that treasure. So, whether it's, going through the difficult times that is characteristic of the heroine's journey in midlife, I want women to come out stronger, more capable, claiming their self-worth, owning their voice, and not waste time while they try to figure it all out on their own. You're not broken, alone, wrong, any of that when life gets totally whacked out of whatever. You are just simply on a heroine's journey, traveling to your very best self. That's what I want women to know.
I love that. And, as I always remind the listeners and my students, trust the process. The way knows the way. And when you step into that power,
Uh-huh.
that ancient power, this isn't, it's funny, Joan, because this isn't anything new. This power that know thyself, especially from the divine feminine, has been around for thousands of years, right? But like you said,
Uh-huh.
they've dumbed it down. So be mindful and be careful of the things that you're following, the social media and the things that that may degrade or downgrade. There's a lot of myths out there, and for you, what would you be, about resilience and empowerment? Because it's going to take empowerment. It's going to take that resilience. It's going to take that courage and that bravery. And sometimes you need to wait 60 years before you publish your first book. It comes age,
Yeah.
brings that wisdom, right? But I always
Mhm.
talk about the diamond within, because diamonds are only created under extreme stresses and pressures. And we've all gone through it. It's just now, what do you want to reveal? Like Louise Hay did at the age of 60, she revealed that diamond of all of her life experiences that really
Yeah.
resonated with the world, and very similar to the book that you have written. But what is one of the myths that you want to debunk once and for all about resilience or empowerment from your book?
Well, to me, it's that women don't have their own journey. I took
Mm.
Joseph Campbell on and said, "Oh, yes, we do. It's just a
hmm
different journey." And I'll tell you a funny story, and that's that when I went to work on Wall Street, I traded very large blocks of bonds. I started the first female investment banking firm. And, we dressed like men in suits that were
hmm
men's clothing. I mean,
Soup pants, yep.
We smashed our boobs down so that maybe they wouldn't notice that we were actually men. At that
Right.
time, I had a haircut that was, just an inch long. And then one day, I don't know if this happened or I dreamed it, but I dreamt that I just dove into my closet, threw out all those brown suits that had no reflection of my personality, and
Right.
just knew that I had to come back to my feminine. And that's what I want. I want us to be authentic as women and not feel that there is a success path that we have to shape. I love that word, shift shape
Ship shape.
ourselves into in order to find success in this world. No, women have their own success path, and now it's time to live.
Yeah, step into that power for sure. And did I hear you correctly at the beginning of the show that I am the first male host to actually have this conversation with you?
You are. You are. And
Well,
I appreciate you because you're not saying, oh, Joan, no, there's only one path. You're not saying that at all. You're saying
no.
that the divine is the creation of the masculine and the
Exactly. Well, I'm glad that I can do that. And again, to come on and share with my listeners the perspective of this book and your journey, stepping into these environments and, wearing the brown suits and then realize, you know what, that's not who I am. To know thyself, you know what, I'm going to be more colorful. I'm going to step into my authentic self and share my message, knowing that there's always going to be opinions and judgment with what we do. And we could go all the way back to Plato when he talked about the only way you're not going to get judged is not to do anything, not to say anything, or not to be anything. So for your listeners out there, step into that heroine, be the hero of your own journey and step into that self-worth and that empowerment and everything that Joan is talking about. Just for the sake of time, because this show goes, I could talk to you for another 2 hours on this topic because I find it so fascinating. I think my wife would want to talk to you more. She was really, into the message and really resonated with what you have written and talked about. You also have a podcast as well that the listeners can tune into. Tell them a little bit about your podcast.
We do. It's called The Heroine's Journey with Joan Perry, found on all streaming devices. We go further into depth on these different subjects that are not only so important to women, but that women have not talked about. They've just kind of, sex got better when we talked about it. And that's the purpose of the Heroine's Journey podcast is for us to continue to grow our authenticity as women.
Yeah, and I wanted to throw that out there for you.
Thank you.
I wanted to throw that out there for well, because we're just, it's like the iceberg effect, right? We're only touching just a little bit within an hour on this show. We're only touching that top part of the iceberg that you see, but underneath the water, there's a whole bigger part of the iceberg. And I think for my listeners out there, I think that if they're very interested in this topic and this perspective and this journey, then definitely tune into Joan's podcast, again, found wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, right next to Inspired Living. So,
yes.
One question I have for you, as far as, you wrote this book and you've gone through this journey. How can women build stronger networks in their journey towards that empowerment? Besides getting the book, besides listening to your podcast, what are some other ways that the community, because I think community and society and consciousness plays big roles. They play big impacts, especially on younger women today that are influenced through social media, through influencers, if you will. What can they do to have that stronger support network to stay on the path, to not get afraid or, be worried about what people think or what people say, to keep going, to know thyself and to be that authentic self?
Well, you're kind of crossing two wheels on the cart when you ask that question. You're asking the question that has to do with the people you surround yourself with and who you let into your life. And you're asking the question about your self-worth and how you monitor and manage the messages that are in your own brain. And, so that's why I say, in my view, the book kind of puts it all together in a way that you would hear about this or that, but not how it all worked together. And let me give you an example. When my self-worth got better, let's say when my self-worth wasn't good, the people in my life were all takers. They all enjoyed being around me when life was, becoming rosy and happy because I had a good ability to do that. And as soon as it wasn't, they all left like rats scurrying off the ship. And what I learned was to develop much better skills about choosing the people in my life. And I give some real fun tools. One of them is called the sticker system in the book that helps me remember, who am I dealing with here? What have I actually seen this person do? And to ask that question, do I want this person in my life? Because, and sometimes, you want them in your life, but you also have to speak up authentically and say, I really like you in my life, but there are certain things that don't play well in how we're interacting, and I need you to look at that and make some improvements. So there are many skills around how we build, and we call it in the book the circle of love. I know in my own heart now that the people around me are going to lift me up, champion me on, encourage me. They're there for me. And if times get rough, they're still there for me. So,
I love that.
We're talking about the four wheels of the cart here, and there are certain skills you have to achieve to be a heroine in each of those four areas of life, which, is why I had to write the book.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it there. I'd love to have you come back and share more with us. Joan, it's been a fun episode, and again, for the listeners, we want to apply what we're talking about. So this is a good way to get the book, which Joan is offering for free. You can go to her websites, walkthejourney.com or heroinesbook.com. Again, all of the information is on our social media pages if you want to get the step-by-step and apply that to your own journey as well. So again, my friend, thank you for coming on, sharing the perspective, writing this book. Check out Joan's podcast if you want to go deeper into that iceberg that we're just barely touching on today. And I appreciate you and what you do and the work you're doing and that positive vibration that you're putting out into our world that so much needs it. And keep doing what you're doing, Joan.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your support and love of your listeners.
My pleasure. All right, listeners. What a great show. Thanks, Joan, for coming on. Until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate. Most importantly, wherever you're at in this world, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover the diamond within. We'll see you next time here on Inspired Living.